Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Equine Voices. My name is Ronnie, and I am your host for this evening. I'm really pleased and delighted to introduce my guest for this evening. Her name's Heather Drummond from Canada, and shortly I'll bring her in and she can introduce what she does. And sorry, I've got my phone on. And what it is she does, we've had a few technical hitches and we've been laughing our heads off because we literally had 4 minutes and there was no sound coming out. So hopefully this will go fine, but that's live for you, so don't worry about it. Heather is a naturopath and she also does backflower remedies. She has her own podcast called Seers, Beers, Knowers and Doers. I've got that written down so I don't forget. So she's got many talents, but without further ado, I'll introduce Heather before I get any more tongue-tied. Oh my goodness, this is flowing beautifully, Heather. And
Yes,
breathe. Would you like to introduce
thank you.
yourself? You'll probably make a better job than I just did. So off you go.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Ronnie. It's been really interesting to cross paths with you. It's almost like we're airplanes going the same direction, but periodically cross paths, either with guests or just through Facebook. And so it's lovely to finally meet you and chat. And I wish we chatted a little bit more before we got started, but good old Mercury got his hands in and said, "We're going to mess with your technology." So thank you so much. A little bit about me. I joked before we started that I'm usually the one asking the questions. So I hope that it goes all right from this angle. We'll try it. So thank you. I am a naturopath for the last 17 years, and I've started off as a kid wanting to be a vet. So as I developed my own business, I always included animals in my business, so dogs and cats and whatever, sometimes birds were a part of my clientele. I quietly made that available, and that part always gave me joy. And in the last, I'm going to say, 5 years, I dipped my toe in the land of horses through a therapeutic riding program. I was a spotter and a walker and a lead. And then about a year after I stopped doing that, I got reintroduced into the horse world because it just had this intuition of I need to learn about horses. And one of the people at that barn that the therapeutic riding was out of was putting on a theory part of learning how to ride and stable management for a certification program for coaching. And I'm like, well, that's a place to start. So I started with that. And then I went into another intuitive place where a friend of mine moved to France from my local area. And I mentioned to her that I wanted to learn about horses. And she's like, oh, you need to meet my friend's husband. And I'm like, okay. So through Facebook, I asked to meet him because he's not on Facebook. And lo and behold, he lives 5 minutes from my house and has a barn with anywhere from 8 to 12 horses. And he's been in horses from a baby. His dad was a horseman. And so I landed very well right before COVID, September before COVID started. And as COVID happened, I was at that beautiful place 5 minutes from my house, literally 8 hours, sometimes 12 hours a day, and just got totally immersed and enamored with horses ever since. So I'm fortunate to be able to still go there, and I consider them like elders, and I get to be in their presence regularly. So that part of my life is fun. On the business side, I do health assessment that actually supports people physically, emotionally, and energetically. And it's something that I developed because I didn't want to compete with anybody. And I use a machine called the Biomeridian machine that helps me tune in, and I don't have to be present with the people. COVID was another blessing that way that opened that up wider. because my local clients didn't know I would do that. And so I just work from home and use my hand as a surrogate for whoever I'm dealing with, whether it's a horse or a dog or a person. And we figure out what can support them physically, emotionally, and energetically through that process. So that's a little bit about me.
Wow, that sounds really interesting. So, how does a machine work? Is it a little bit like kinesiology, muscle testing?
So it is part of that. It's the biomeridian is part of something that a gentleman named Dr. Voll developed, Voll, and he developed the process of combining Chinese meridians with other body parts. So using the hands and feet, you can tune into the vitality of the meridians. And also, he mapped out through dealing with thousands of people that particular points on the hands and feet were actually mapping out to things like the lymphatic system or the throat or the ears or systems like the adrenals and the endocrine system. So he's actually done all the work and created the map, and then from there, using that awareness, we're able to tap in and with people's permission or the animal's permission, to find out what's going on with them on those different layers. So, and it's kind of like going into the energetic database, and so you can go back in time and see when things occurred or see how a body system felt 4 years ago or last January or whatever the situation was that may add insight into the mix as far as trying to discover and help people feel
Wow,
better
that's
or optimize health. So
yeah, that sounds really interesting. So, so if you're doing it on a horse, or anybody, you don't have to be present. You use your own body,
yes,
and
yeah, as a
so
surrogate.
is there like a set pattern of things that you do? I'm just trying to
Um,
picture it in my head what it looks like because I don't really
yeah,
know.
sure. So there is, when I first got trained in it 17 years ago, they do have a set pattern. And it goes through about 38 different body systems. And so I usually use that as the map where to go, at least at the beginning, and then intuitively, if we're drawn to dig down deeper than hypothetically the reproductive system, we can go into, well, is it the left ovary, is it the right ovary, is it another aspect of the reproductive system that's having problems? So his is kind of dealing with a whole system to start with, because I see the body kind of like a database. We can go into that file a little bit further and gather more information. And again, it's not replacing a medical test. I'm not a doctor, I'm not a vet. It's just gathering insight into the vitality of particular aspects of the body physically. And I'm a firm believer that emotional and energetic aspects of life sit on top of the physical body and can create issues in the physical body. So
Yeah,
it
yeah,
helps
me
heal
too.
those things. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I had a feeling about that.
I was still laughing about earlier. So for people that are just joining us, we had a few technical hitches. We didn't have any sound. Then we did have sound, and then you couldn't hear me. Then
Yeah.
I couldn't hear you, and it was trying to get that organized before we actually went live. So that was our first meeting.
Yes, it's like, hi, oh, we've got an agenda. We have to get connected first before we can do this for people live.
Oh,
So,
but you've got such a nice energy, which is good. I can feel it from here. Um, okay, so as you was talking about how you work with this, what's the machine called again? It's
it's called
called
a biomeridian machine.
biomeridian. Yeah, as you were talking, I was picking up from you that actually, although you're using that, you're also more so tapping into your intuition, that's coming through quicker than actually that you're picking up on the machine. So it's
Yes.
almost like you know before you get to the machine,
Yeah.
because that's something that you do naturally anyway.
Yeah. Some people need the validation of
Yeah,
numbers on a machine, and so that was a piece of what drew me to the machine, is
yes,
that at that point in my career too, I was needing the validation of like, is this for real? Like, I even asked for Goosebumps to show up so I wouldn't miss anything or dealing with people's health. I was like, can you please make sure you give me a sign that I'm on the right track? And yeah, Goosebumps showed up, and
yeah.
I'll be like pulling up my arm going, see, like that's important. Like that right there, that's a sign. I asked for it. It's important. So I always wanted to have like, know that God had my back kind of thing. And I
Yeah.
didn't want the full responsibility. And people have the responsibility over their own health. I'm just merely giving them information to put against their own intuition and their own body and feeling. So
Yeah.
I'm just merely giving them information that sometimes is confirming their intuition, because it's not being validated, because their blood tests come back normal and my scale of normal is smaller than the medical system. And that's a beautiful thing, because otherwise people would think they were really sick a lot of times, and they're not. It's just they need optimization, they use a bit of a boost. So.
And like you said earlier, emotions and everything that happens. I'm not going to say to us, because it sounds like, it's random, and it's not always random. But everything that we are, how can I rephrase that?
Bump up against.
Yes, yeah. Or we attract, or I mean, when you say that, they go, "I didn't attract that." Yes. Yeah, it affects us in lots of different ways, and even things that we think we can't remember, they can be years later, and something will pop up, and you think, "Oh, crikey, that's just come into my consciousness. That's just come into my memory." And
So
some of them are funny things. And you think, "Well, I haven't thought about that for ages." Yeah, it's really interesting. So, Heather, let's go back. When did you discover, or when did you realize actually that you're? So I'm saying this, but we're all intuitive. Everybody's intuitive.
yeah.
It as we are talking this evening in the UK, not where you are. It's something that we've all got. So this podcast is based around people that are come into contact with horses, and it's how the horses help them in their lives, and how it helps them build their own intuition, own inner guidance. But it's not just horse related, because when you use your intuition, it's something that you use from when you get up, from when you go to bed. It's not like a something that you use 9 to 5 or a few hours and then you go back to your other life. It's something that hopefully you can incorporate in your day-to-day life, because that's when the magic happens as well. So if we go back, when is it something that you feel you've always had, which you will have done, but was aware of? How did you discover that in yourself?
So my mom would describe me as Fae, which to me is a word from the UK that describes intuition, or more connected to the spirit than to the earth. I was a chatty Cathy as a little one, and I distinctly remember the story of talking away at the dinner table and Dad saying, "Would you go out and talk to the birds?" And so I did. And he introduced me with that one comment to the crows. And the crows have been, every morning walking to school, I'm like, "Good morning," and having a chat with the animals. I was a kid who knew I needed a dog, and the dog wasn't happening in my world fast enough. I think my dad was afraid of dogs, and my mom had dogs growing up. And so I think it was 4 going into school. And so I decided I was going to act like a dog. I was going to scratch at the door. I was going to beg for my food. I'm going to make this happen. And the kindergarten teacher called my parents like not long after school started and said, "You need to get this kid a dog." And I'm like, "A score." Like, I don't remember even doing that math, but I remember the dog showing up and being my best friend until third year university. And I knew when she passed, she was on the other side of the country, and I called up studying for exams going, "What's wrong with buttons?" And Dad's like, "I'll get your mother." And I'm like, "What's wrong with buttons?" And then Mom said they had to put her down. So that way has shown up in different ways over time. So having dreams about situations and people, but it's not the actual people that those situations happen to. I think there was a time when I quit my job before going to, I just quit my job thinking like, okay, I've heard the words, I'm done. This has been corporate Heather, the way that Drummonds operate. You get a job, you get a pension, you work hard, and you're secure, and everything's okay. And Eat, Pray, Love was out about that time. And I'm like, well, I'll just take a year for me. That's socially acceptable. Like, I can do that financially, otherwise. And literally, like 3 weeks later, I was registered for the School of Natural Nutrition here in Canada, because it was literally a quarter of a kilometer away. Like, I could walk to school like a little kid again. And through the course of that course, I was introduced to many things: energy medicine, Chinese medicine, obviously nutrition. And at that point, I was not feeding my body. I had health issues. And so that opened me up to learning how to make soup. I didn't know how to make soup. I didn't cook. Like, we weren't allowed in my kitchen because it was always so small. And so intuitively, things have been put in my place, even when I don't know what they are. Like, I never would have guessed that I would take that course. And when the year ended, I was like, I'm so not going to the corporate world in the way that I was before. And I kind of thrown the bathwater and the baby out at the same time, because my immature brain was like, oh, all that must be bad, right? And I was really good at hiring people and managing people, because that was the role I was in, and those things came natural. But in the course of throwing out the bathwater and the baby, that intuitive knowing went sideways, and some lessons showed up in the form of people. And through the course of that learning, it's been interesting, because that's shown up in the type of clients that I've attracted sometimes, is helping them with reorienting, because I was giving a lot of power, and power is maybe, I was going to the outside for advice way more than listening to my own intuition. So I don't know if power is the right word for that exactly, but in one shape or another, it was. And so there was decisions with my business and decisions with personal life that were not intuitive. And so I think at some point there's a bunch of us that fall off our intuitive wagon, and then we climb back on, and then we protect it like crazy and are screaming from the rooftops that everybody needs to be listening to their intuition. And I was one of those people. I had fallen off the wagon and would listen to it sometimes, would listen to it in my work, and literally heard, you need to live like you're in an appointment or in a treatment. You need to live that way, because you're not living that way right now. And I was like, how do I do that? Like, it was a disconnect for sure, because I was right in the throes of dealing with those people that I'd given a lot of power to, because they knew more than me. So it's been fun. It's been a journey. I mean, even the podcast was intuitive. So yeah, I don't know if that 100% answered your question,
Yeah,
but
no, I,
it's
yeah, I mean, it's not something, so being intuitive, when you say that word, it sounds like you're in a group of people that only certain people are members of. Intuition, like I said earlier, is something that everybody has. Everybody
100%.
has it. Okay.
Mhm.
It's whether we choose to listen to it or whether we believe it, whether we think it's our head shutting.
Yeah.
And that's the same with communication. So when I'm doing animal communication, when I first started, and even now, until you've listened, said it, and passed it on, you don't know if that's that if it's correct or not. And by that, I don't mean you need verification from the other person, or you need something from the animal or the person to say that you're on the right track. Because when you're communicating, the same with your intuition, you're interpreting a language that does not have words. It's energy, it's a feeling, and it's the feel that's really, really important, because it's the feel that tells you whether you're off track or you're back online. And I don't think, for me, it's something you stay in center balance the whole time, because it's the fluctuations that give you the perspective and what you know is correct or not correct, or feels good or doesn't feel so good. And that's something that you work on over time, because it changes. It's even more subtle, but when you come out of it, it's like bam, it's really bam, because because you got used to the nice feeling of it. But again, I don't think it's something that you stay in the whole. You're in it, but you don't stay in a bubble, sat with your legs crossed, because that's not what life is. So it's the fluctuations, it's the experiences that make you realize what you want or you don't want. And that can be, so I'm not talking about extreme things, because that does happen as well with people. But it's like if you wake up in the morning and somebody ticks you off, and you can either decide to be angry all day, and they're probably oblivious to it anyway, or you can choose to have a bit of steam, release that steam, and then just go, okay, that's gone, and think about something else and change your mood. And it's when you do that, when you start to play around with that, and the more you do it, the quicker you come back. And you still catch yourself. Sometimes it depends on where the moon is, where the sun is, what the weather is. Lots of things trigger you. Lots of things trigger you. My big thing used to be, which is a lot of people's things, money. I would never do anything because I didn't have. And I'm conscious when I'm saying that word now that I don't like to use it too often. And it took a long time, because that goes back to being worthy, and all that sort of stuff, and back into your past and your parents and all that. If you wait for the right situation, the right money in the bank account, the right person to come along, the right job, the right lifestyle, before you say, right now I'll do it, it's not going to happen. I mean, it might do, but that might be something you're going to learn from that if you get all that, it doesn't mean to say you're going to be happy. But that's somebody else's lesson. So the biggest thing for me was to say yes to opportunities, and that's something I pinched off Warwick Schiller's podcast. He was saying that most of his guests, the biggest thing in common was they all said yes to opportunities, even before they knew whether they could do it, or whether it was practical, or whether it was viable. And I started to do that, and it was amazing what came along. And also decisions that you make. Normally, you would make a decision based on common sense, based on what you see, what's being presented, and is it going to work out? You'd want the whole package. Whereas I found now I make a decision knowing nothing. If it feels right, and that's the thing, it's the feel. If it feels right, and I just get that gut feeling to do it, I do it. Now, if I'm trying to make it happen and I'm really pushing against it because I want to make it happen. Now, you and I know that regarding the summit. And even that, I mean, I was getting, everything was laid out for me up to that point, and then it didn't happen for personal reasons. And I was really, I'm going to swear, I was really pissed that I didn't get there, excuse the language. And yeah, that taught me a lot because there was lots and lots of triggers in there. There was lots and lots of triggers. I'm just checking. We've got a comment saying somebody has no sound. Can you hear me okay, Heather?
I can hear you.
Yeah.
Oh, dear.
So can somebody just let me know if you can still hear this live? Because Julia said, by the way, thank you very much for the people that are joining us. I will put your comments up. I didn't want to interrupt Heather. I like to bring the comments up a little bit later.
Oh, I hope they can hear us.
Oh, she went back in. I can hear you. I hear you. Oh, yay.
Okay, good.
Yay.
We've pushed the field such that it's allowing us to happen.
Good sound now. Brilliant. Okay. We've got snow in the UK, and I think there's a lot of stuff going on with the power supply as well. So it might be dipping in and out, but I've lost track what I was saying now. But yeah, for me, it's very much about the feel, which is where the horse world, that's again, working with horses and the communication and watching and observing, that's taught me very much about the subtleties which you bring into yourself. Yeah, it's fascinating how it works, but you've got to have leap of faith. That's the word I was looking for. You have to have a leap of faith, and not wait for the right time, the right opportunity. The right opportunity, if it feels right, but it will come to you. You don't have to make it happen. If you have a passion for something, or if you feel yourself pulled in a certain direction, you just follow that road and you wait for that opportunity. And it usually never lets you down. It doesn't let you down. It might give you skills and obstacles that you wouldn't necessarily ask for. However, quite often they are big teachers in their own way.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I had one lady share with me on the podcast that even not listening is listening, because you're still going to end up where you're supposed to go. You just will have chosen a different road to get there, and you may have different lessons along that way. But I was like, what? Are you kidding me? And she's right, though. She's really right, because sometimes we think we've lost the opportunity of the lifetime because we hesitated and said no, or whatever the case may be, or we chose maybe the wrong relationship or whatever, right? But you do not stop your life and do not stop your learning just because of a choice. You always have the opportunity to choose in the next 10 seconds, and in the next 10 seconds, and in the next 10 seconds. And those choices can change and put you back on the original path or the proverbial path. So she stuck with me because I was like, huh? Like, this whole podcast is about listening to your intuition. What do you mean? You're throwing me a wild one there. But she was right, because every 10 seconds we choose our life. We choose what we want to do next. We choose whether or not we respond to the opportunity. We might have said yes, but we might be in that pause and patience of waiting for the whole thing to show up. Because life isn't always instantaneous either. And so I think intuition also can come with patience, because depending how people have intuition, some people really are really, really, really good at seeing future events, and others are more about the intuition in the present moment. And if you get caught into like seeing the potential, the intuition of the potential or the future, and you wait for that to occur and you live in between, that can be also a thing. Or if you're impatient with it, you can actually push it away because your impatience is not on the same frequency as the intuitive hit that was so delightful. I don't know if that makes any sense or not, but
Yeah, no, it did.
sometimes that can take place.
Yeah, so I don't think I'd like to. I have a friend who I go to for guidance now and then, but I've never been one for going all the time and living my life to that. But it's usually something she confirms for me. So I have a feeling, and then she'll confirm it for me, and she's usually spot on. But sometimes, due to external experiences and influences, it might not be on the time frame that was initially spoken of. But that's because every second you have a new path in front of you, as you said. Every second you have another destiny, and this is why I say to people that that like have to have cards read, or in communication, I will say to my clients, this communication is relevant for now at this moment. I could come back tomorrow, I could come back in an hour's time, and it may be different because the information that you've gathered may change your thought process, may change your mind, which will change the energy that's connected with your horse. And it's the same with everything. You can go somewhere and it's at that moment, because as the communication is coming, as the information is coming, the energy is already changing and it's on a different trajectory. I can't even say the word. Different.
Trajectory.
That's the word.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but getting your head around that, if you're not familiar, can be a little bit hard at times. Yeah, definitely. I'm just going to put a few comments on, so hopefully people can still hear us. I think it's dipping in and out, so I can only apologize. It looks okay here, but I also know that's not always the case. It depends on the connection. But we've had really cold weather for us, so it might be affecting. So Emily, this is obviously
Emily.
somebody you know. Would you like to
Yes.
read? Would you like to read that out for the benefit of the podcast later?
Gosh, Emily is Emily's just a delight to have in my circle. So I'm so happy she's here. So it says, this sounds a little egotistical to say this, but yes, thank you so much, Emily, for your kindness. She says, I'm so happy to see Heather being interviewed. Heather is amazing for humans and horses, and she and her talents have quite literally helped to change my life and the lives of my horses. Thank you, Emily. That is like, I mean, it's mutual, because you have to have people show up who are interested and open to the possibilities of what can happen in either animal communication or in a health assessment. And Emily's one of these people. I keep telling her, you're my ideal client. Can I just photocopy you and have more of you? Because her horses are such characters and delights to deal with. And Emily's just one of these people who is on this beautiful path of just putting one foot in front of the other and doing what's right for her horses and herself, and watching that transformation go on and being privy to just seeing the flower kind of. You've seen it too, I'm sure, Ronnie, like when you see the flower of a person and their animals kind of open up, it's just like, oh my God, I'm part of being able to witness that. Like, it's just such an honor, because when you see it, I'm sure, Ronnie, when you see the penny drop as far as the animal communication is concerned, and that bond between that person and the horse or dog, or like, gets deeper, that to me is just this, like, I don't know, it's like fireworks going off in my head. It's just so beautiful to watch. It's just, yeah. I feel privileged.
It is. And I was smiling because one of the things is accepting with gratitude when people are happy with your work, or they want to give you a compliment, because for me, you sort of oh, you push it away. But I mean, I do it so much now, but it's one of the things that we're not used to accepting. But
Yeah.
it's that's actually a lesson for us to be okay to accept that and say thank you with gratitude. But it's
Yeah.
still, it's strange because it's not always natural. We sort of, oh yeah, thank you, and change the subject. But so that's lovely that she came and said that about
Yes.
you.
Yes. Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
it's mutual. It's when you find the synergy with the right people who resonate with your work.
Yeah.
It's like, to me, that sky is unlimited. Like, it's the places we can go is
Mm.
just beautiful. So it's,
It is.
yeah.
And the part about so if I'm seeing a client, I I love to show them to interact and to do something. So, I mean, they have a connection with their animal anyway. They have a connection, and they wouldn't be getting me out if they didn't. And quite often it's just to confirm something they know, or just to point them in the right direction. Um, and sometimes what they think is important, or what they're trying to ask, it's not relevant to the horse. That's not what they're interested in. And sometimes it can be hard to relay a message when you're going back to the human element and saying, just what is it you want? You have to be honest with yourself. What do you want from this? Because what you're asking of the horse, they're asking of you.
Mm.
I'm just trying to think of an example. I can't. Yeah, I can't think off the top of my head. But sometimes they're the hardest ones because they both want slightly different things. Or they can have us. So the horse can be capable of doing something, and they're capable, and they can relay that to me to relay to the person. But sometimes the heart isn't in it, and it's not always because the horse's heart isn't in it. They know that the human's heart is not in it for their reasons, but they don't always know that, because sometimes it's I think I should be doing this, or but that is the idyllic picture that I'm looking at. But actually I can feel that inside of them there's something that's not fully embracing that, and that's what the horse is picking up on. And that's a hard one to explain to somebody, because I always hopefully would like to talk to a person the way that I would want to be talked to. Because if somebody came to me to say something, I'd want to understand, and I'd want to do the best of changing something. So yeah, that can be. I'm trying to think of an example, but I can't really. But they are the harder ones, and sometimes it's just if they acknowledge that or understood that part, then it's like, okay, the rest of the communication can come. But until that's acknowledged, then it's like a conversation. Well, they don't say this because they don't talk well as we do, but it's almost like, well, what's the point? Because until that's has clarity, what you're asking me is irrelevant. So trying to get that across sometimes is difficult, especially if the person is unaware that that's how they feel, because it's not always what they're thinking, but there's something in the core of them that's blocking for whatever reason. But that's not my role. I'm not there to be a counsellor. However, sometimes it is a little bit trying to guide them to see that themselves, because the power, as you said, is allowing them to find that themselves, not telling them. You guide them, and then they figure it out. And that's the change. The greatest change is when we change ourselves. Nobody can make us change. Nobody has the power to make us do anything. But if we feel that we should, that's our choice still. And that's another direction.
Yes, that should work.
Anyway, Heather, I've been chatting. You talk now.
Oh no, it's
So
all good.
I
It's
tell you
all
what,
good.
I'm really interested about your podcast. Where did the name come from?
Oh gosh, yeah. This is because yeah, literally intuitively, it was like your podcast is going to be seers, beers, knowers, and doers, and I was like, that's a handle that even has like punctuation in it. Like, how are people going to search and find this? This is just like wow. But I conceded that, okay, that's the way that a whole bunch of people receive intuition. I mean, there's many, many, many ways that people receive intuition. So I'm like, okay, that, sure, that works. Well, I think I was into season 2, like 2 years in, and I'm like, wait a minute. And I'm on a podcast saying this, going, every morning I drive to work, I would always ask, kind of putting it in the field, like guide, guard, and protect me. Make sure I see what I need to see, know what I need to know, do what I need to do, be what I need to be in order to be of service. Wow. 2 years later, I'm like, those are the same words. That's the same thing I've been saying for, I don't know, 15 years. So the humor wasn't lost on me, but that is literally where it came from. Because I guess I just see it as an invitation also that there is more than one way to receive intuition. And the whole point is to pull intuition off the pedestal of like, oh, I went to see a medium or a channel. Great. Like, that's awesome. There are people that do that for a living, and they can be very valuable in nudging people along or confirming their intuition. But like you say, everybody's got it. And so what I'm trying to do is, by sharing people's stories and sharing, like consciously asking every guest, how does intuition come to you? I'm trying to like take that, the if we fold a piece of paper and we cut out a gingerbread man and we pull it apart, we've got like 50 gingerbread men. I'm trying to give people the opportunity to go, hey, well, I've had that happen to me before. Yes, I've heard a song before and it actually resonated with the message, and that made me do X, Y, and Z. So it's to really inspire people to listen to their own intuition while sharing amazing people who are doing cool things in the world by listening to their intuition. And so the title was, it's a mouthful. I'm sure people thought I was saying a store called Sears and let's go have some beers because of my accent. So it is a mouthful, but it's been fun because that's what it is. And I see it like crows gathering in the trees, like literally at night. If you've ever hung out and witnessed crows, every night at dusk, they fly across that sky and they all congregate in trees for a meeting, nightly meeting. And it may change where it is in the location that you're at, but it's like being on a flight path if you're anywhere near that location. And that gathering of crows is that community, that touching base, that is everybody accountable. Everybody's accountable for, okay, how was your day? Like it's just a community, I guess. I'm trying to build a community of like minds and bring more people along on this journey. Yeah.
Which is what we need. And like you said, if you it comes in many forms. I mean, I'm sat here thinking, oh my God, she picks up like that. That's amazing. I wish I picked up like that. But it was my horse that got me into the communication. But before then,
Of course your horse did.
Yeah, yeah. But before then, I was going through a divorce, and I think I've mentioned this on another podcast, so I'll just touch on it. Well, I was married, and on the wedding day, I remember saying to my friend, "I don't want to get married. I don't want to get married." And she says, "Oh, it's nerves." And I was going, "No, it's not." And prior to then, I'd been the sort of person that probably would need somebody, because it wasn't conscious, but I probably thought I couldn't do things on my own. That was the way it was. And this gentleman that I married was like a knight in shining armor at the time. in disguise, but at the time that's what he seemed like. And he did lots of things that I wasn't used to. He was quite attentive. He actually bought me a horse because he knew I liked horses, and I was like, oh my goodness. But on the other side, he was very insecure and very jealous, and he was total opposite to me. Total opposite. I would talk and hug a stranger, and I found my whole personality changing. Now, I felt the signs, but I didn't at the time think that I was able to do anything about it or change. It was almost like, I've made this bed, I have to lie in it now. And it was only because he went off with a friend, and that was the best thing that ever happened to me. The best
Freedom.
thing. I mean, initially it was like,
Yeah.
revenge sort of thing, but revenge is best
Emotions.
taken cold. Because he was a compulsive. Yeah, actually, I better be careful who I say. So, but he learned me.
Full of
He taught.
lessons. He was
Yes,
full of
he
lessons.
was full of lessons. He taught
Yeah.
me, and the best thing he did was went off with my friend, because
Yeah.
that's when I started to look and think I had the warning signs, but I ignored it because it was right on the day. People were saying no, but I basically did not listen to my intuition, my gut feeling, and I think it was a little while afterwards. I was walking somewhere, and I questioned everything about myself. Why is there a pattern here? Why am I following this pattern? Because I've come from a divorced family. What is this pattern? I need to break this. And it was the realization. So I didn't have the answers, but it was a realization that I am responsible for my life and what happens in my life. It happens around me, to me, and because of me. But I'm not a victim. I'm not a victim. And as soon as I realized that, it was like I was walking in clouds, and the feeling was, it was very euphoric. It was beautiful. And I thought, I've got it. That's it. But it was the realization. So again, I didn't need to know the answers. I didn't need to know my path ahead of me. I just acknowledged my own ignoring of myself, and that's coming through now very clearly. And that was, hello, welcome home.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so that was not my first, but it was my boom. Okay, there you go. Now let's start again.
Yeah.
And it was a rocky road, but I would never go back. I'd never go back.
Yeah. Lessons like that, I see it like they give you the gift of legs and spine, and then that, like I said before, kind of that reverence of your own connection with your own intuition and your own voice, your own, so it's sorry that you had to go through it, but it likely wouldn't change it because it's given you everything that you do today, right? Like those are the things that it's like, oh, I wish I'd learned that sooner. That was kind of bumpy, but now you can see it a mile away, and you can help others with it, and you have like this. At least that's kind of been my path, is being able to, like, okay,
I think it's letting people know that there is always another choice. This is not it. Wherever you are in life, if you're not happy, now I can sit here and say that because I'm a single person. I have my animals, but I'm responsible for me. I don't have to think about anybody else. If you're in a relationship, or you're married, you've got children, it's slightly different, but it's still, you don't ignore your needs for everything else, because again, you're giving out everything, instead of looking after the one person that you really need to, because that person's important too. I was going to go down somewhere else, but it's not always. The word selfish is a word, but it can have many meanings. But actually, the person that so I'm saying me, you are the most important person, because if you don't look after yourself, you can't look after everything around you. You can't look after others. But it's if
So
you're
true.
contented in your life and you strive for what you want and you believe in what you want, then it has a knock-on effect. It has a butterfly effect, and your family and your children, your friends will see that. They will either have a moment where they see that and think, that's giving me inspiration, or they'll go in another direction. But it's, yeah, I don't know where I'm going with this conversation now. That's getting quite deep.
That's
I have to
okay.
forget. It's not
You're
just.
talking my language.
It's not just us two talking.
Yeah,
So
no,
I
you're
tell you what.
talking my language, and it's interesting because I'll bring it back to the horse. Is many many horses have been the messenger for self-care for their owners. I don't know if you see that pattern in your world, but in my clientele, many horses have been a messenger for self-care for their owners in my world. It's like, I know you're trying to care for me, but it becomes a 2-for-1. That the horses are standing there, nudging nudging their person to look after themselves, So it's, I don't know if you see the same thing, but that may be something.
No, I do, and it's a there's lots of different reasons, but obviously, animals are similar as far as the same as humans, but they have needs too. So if their owners are carrying so much baggage, emotional baggage, so much tension, and they're not looking after themselves, sometimes that's a lot for an animal, and they don't. It's not rational. It's not the way we think. It's just that, why are you doing that to yourself? Why would you do that to yourself? Why would you hurt yourself? And they want us to be the best that we can be, so that we can see clearly. We can see what's in front of us. And sometimes they're saying, then you can see me, then I can talk to you, then I can give you answers to the questions,
Yeah.
and it's not quite as simple as that, but it's hard to explain sometimes.
Sometimes it is as simple as that.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's like, and people will do things. So not all people, the people who I like to attract into my practice, and I'm sure into your practice, are people who are motivated to do the right thing by their horse. So if the horse can use that, the horses are smart. They're going to use whatever they can to get the message across to their people. And if it's stress or energy or whatever the circumstances are of the person or the barn or the horse themselves, that is creating that dynamic of fog or disconnection or lack of presence, or whatever the situation is, the people will be motivated, if they're in our practice or listening to this podcast, I'm sure, to make those changes for their animals. Which, like, what a gift that the animal is giving people, because sometimes people won't do it for themselves to start with, because that program of selfishness is out there loud and clear.
Yeah.
And so their animals are amazing. They're just amazing.
I mean, I'm smiling because I'm one of those people. So even though I'm saying that, I do the same thing. So, but I'm aware of most of it, but I'm not aware of all of it, because I'd be amazing if I was, and I'd be sorting myself out. It's an ongoing thing.
Totally.
But you do talk to yourself. I mean, I talk to myself all the time. It's almost like I'm talking to another person. And sometimes it's like, for goodness sake, get a grip, girl. And then other times it's, what you should be doing. you know she's been saying this for a while, so what are you doing? And it's like, yes, but, and you can feel yourself having an argument with yourself. And so I never talk to somebody as if, here am I, I'm perfect, you know, I've got all the answers and this is what you should be doing. God, no. But this is the empathy and the understanding that I can hopefully bring with me when I connect to somebody. And it's not just horses. Like I said, when you're intuitive, it doesn't have a box where it's, oh, that person's working with horses, so we'll just give her for that. It's everything, as you know, you can have a conversation with a stranger. You can it fine tunes you. It's almost like it starts you like an antenna. It's fine tuning that antenna to where you're picking up lots of things, but you cannot be listening to every single conversation the universe has floating around, because you wouldn't have time to do anything. I mean, I get messages, and most of the time I'm in my car driving, and I'll get messages for lots of people. And sometimes it comes in waves. It's like there'll be a few people, and I'll be getting messages, and then it sort of naturally subsides. But it's usually because they've already started to listen more to their intuition, or they're on that path anyway, and it's not needed. But also, if I stay connected with every single person that I've connected to, I wouldn't get out of bed, because there'd be no time.
Yeah.
There'll be no time, because I would be constantly like on the phone 24/7. So it comes at the right time for whoever, and I'm just one little wire that's going to wherever's needed at the time. So it goes across the board, your intuition. So Heather, where are you today? What is it that you've got planned coming up? Is there anything new that you're going to be experiencing or pushing out there?
So again, the element of intuition and patience sometimes are hand in hand. There's, from when I was a kid, I was wanting to be alone on the mountain with my animals. And I don't think that I'm going to be alone on a mountain with my animals, but what's kind of playing in the field is that animals are coming, maybe not just for me to care for, but I think that there's an opportunity with mental health and stress and animals to support us in that way. And I don't know what it looks like yet, but it could be 5 years from now. It could be whenever, but there's something brewing in that way, shape, or form, in the very local sense, and in the business sense. I'm really being drawn to get writing and put some of the patterns that I've seen in the last 17 years down on paper, possibly to help people who don't find me any other way, because currently that doesn't really exist. So I think there's some element of that that's going to be happening in the next year. Not totally clear on whether that's a book or articles for different platforms. I'm not totally clear what that is, but there's time that's going to be spent writing, I think.
So do you do any writing at all at the minute, or is it just a feeling that you're getting? Do you do any?
Writing's always come very easily for me. It's just knowing what people want to know. That's been my, what do you want to know? I can write an article about that. It's knowing what the need is. It's been my block. But I think I have done writing for my own blog. I've done not tons, but a wonderful podcast guest who's become a integral part of my horse marketing is Maida Pasman, and she she nudges me. She's like, write about this, write about that, write about this, write about that. And so that's been a fantastic partnership that I've brought into my business in the last year or so. And that came about on a podcast. It's like, you love horses, you don't have horses, you're a digital marketer. Like, excuse me, like, can you do this for me? Because this is a void of mine. I need somebody to give me topics and I will write. And so that's one of the things that she's worked with me at. So yeah, it happens. It definitely happens, but not in the, I don't think in the scope that it's going to happen in the next year.
I was, so as you was talking, what I was getting is don't aim for an audience. The audience will find you. So you write what you write for you, not for somebody else.
Yeah.
Because it's you that's going to attract the readers that's needed.
I think it's going to be the work that I do with my health assessment that's going to land in some shape, whether it's a book or and that would be writing for me as opposed to the audience, because the audience doesn't even know that information exists, at this point. So it'll be a good reminder for people who have been clients, but it'll be an opportunity for people with trauma or stressed inflammation to gather awareness through a book instead of through an appointment. So yeah, I think that's what's next.
Sounds exciting. And you mentioned there that you don't own a horse, but you have the privilege of being around lots of horses, which you don't need to. So
it's kind of the ideal.
That's a win-win.
I'm very aware of my beautiful landing spot in terms of that barn. He's graciously kind of been my test kitchen for dealing with inflammation, dealing with older horses, dealing with seeing the effects of supporting a horse with chronic reverse polarity, which is recovering from a stress that happened in the past that the being has stayed in the stress. So
can you explain? So chronic reverse polarity, I wrote that down. What does that actually mean? Can you explain to the listeners?
It's something that isn't on a lot of people's radar, but it happens to every being made with water, including plants. And you witness it with plants when you transplant a plant. They go through a period of stress and then they right themselves, typically because they're grounding themselves often, but not every transplant works, right? So what is the math there? From a human or from an animal's perspective, a lot of chronic reverse polarity is from either the stress was big enough that your immune system couldn't recover from. Reverse polarity is a stress that isn't big enough that your immune system can recover from. And so everybody made of water, which is a polar molecule, has those poles actually shift from positive to negative, negative to positive. And so in that shift, the spinning that occurs, if you were to put two magnets pointing to each other, they'll actually spin. If the two north poles are pointing to each other, they won't stay that way. It'll actually spin and the south will point to the north. So there's literally spinning going on inside all of our water molecules, which to me, in a non-medical, non-scientific sense, creates assembly lines. So that transfer of nutrients and toxins throughout the body happens because we're made of water. And when you have a stress, it will reverse for anywhere from 20 minutes to 5 days. And a stress can be something positive, like going on a trip, but you go on an airplane and you change elevation, and that time zone change can be enough of a stress to constipate somebody when they're on a trip. But then on day 4, they're like, yay, I'm right as rain, let's go. And that reversal of an assembly line is when they're reversed. But it can also be something like an operation where they went under anesthesia, or it can be like a divorce or something very emotional, a death of a close loved one. Like, it can be anything on the radar screen. And if their immune system is not strong enough, or the stress was continuous, meaning, in the next day there was another stress, and the next week there was another stress. If that situation prolongs itself, or the stress was large enough, sometimes the immune system is not strong enough to correct how those assembly lines work. And so then it becomes chronic and can go on for decades in some cases. And there's usually a knowing that, that was actually a really busy time in my life. Or, actually, if I think about it, the people around me, my parents got divorced. Or, there's usually something, whether it's conscious or unconscious, that the body will be like, that was hard then. Or my body hasn't felt as good as it should because I'm doing all these right things, but I'm still not sleeping, or I'm still experiencing a situation that is not as good as it should be based on what I'm doing for my body. I work with that quite a bit, and for horses, dogs, cats, people.
Well, Tara's just asked a question. I'll pop that on. How do you know or your horse has chronic reverse polarity? How do you know you or your horse has chronic reverse polarity?
So one of the things that has become apparent is if something doesn't work as it's supposed to, so hypothetically, a person who drinks coffee and can go to sleep at night, like right before bed, they're having a coffee and they can go to bed, that isn't working like it should. So that would be a classic case of somebody's probably spinning the wrong way, has reverse polarity. So it doesn't necessarily have to be detrimental, but often if somebody takes fish oil, for example, and they burp it up all day, that's an assembly line that's going the wrong way. That would be a sign. If you are trying and trying and trying and trying to have like supplements or food, or like the hoofs never heal, like we cannot get that fixed, like those would be signs that something is reversed, because on paper everything you tried should have developed a outcome that made sense on paper. So that's one of the things that you can look for. The other thing is if you have had that sensation of like, it should be better than this. Like, I do so much and I'm still experiencing symptoms. The other thing can be very behavioral. Like from a horse's perspective, are they more spooky since a trailering incident? Are they more agitated in the cross ties since, that groom that no longer works here? Or, are they dealing with something, you treated them for ulcers, it should be fixed by now, but they're still cinchy. Like there's situational things where something just feels off intuitively, that, my result is not mapping to the effort that I'm putting in. Does that make some sense?
Yeah. So do you do something to help that? How does it work?
So sometimes it's supporting the energy of the being, because literally they've been, body checked into the wall by life. And so their energy can become discombobulated, and that can be, being aware that their energy feels heavier, or they're more tired than they should be. I use applied kinesiology muscle testing to support people and horses and dogs and cats to figuring out what is the immune system needing to get this corrected. Like, why is there a lack here? And so we'll go through nutrients and dosages and lengths of time. And then in that time period, the correction occurs because we've put the right thing, the right nutrient in the body. And it could be more fat in their diet for X amount of time. It could be something as simple as brewer's yeast, or it could be MSM. Like there's a lot of different nutrients. And intuitively, people sometimes try the right nutrient, but they don't have the volume
Yes.
correct,
Yeah.
right? So while I've tried turmeric, like, what do you mean? And I'm like, but it's this many milligrams or grams of
Yeah.
turmeric. And how much did you try? Well, I only tried it for 4 days. It wasn't working. And so again, there's that validation of the intuition working. And it's just like, okay, sometimes that patience component needs to be in there because they noticed maybe the spook or the cinch, but the horse wasn't right from a trailing incident 4 years ago. But because the horse is stoic and loves you, he's not expressing that it's been going on that long. But now his toxic load is such that he just can't hold it in anymore. And so you're seeing the last 30% of the toxic load basically expressing itself, or the inflammation expressing itself. Does that make some sense? It's not on a lot of people's radars.
No, it's really interesting. So and some of the things have been in my awareness from probably, when you research and you're looking into lots of things, you hear snippets and you hear information and different things. When you was talking about the cells, so I know, like, the cells all vibrate, and a cell knows how to work. A healthy cell knows how to work. It vibrates in the right, and then you get the rogue cell, which can be illness, and it's because that's not in sync with the other cells, and it's trying to get that cell to move in the same way as all the others, because they all have their own memory and their own. A cell is a unique energy form in its own right. So when I was talking, it's getting all, and that's what I could see, all the cells. Can you remember the little Pac-Man?
Yes.
And
Yeah.
it was a little picture of these little Pac-Men all going in the right direction.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, there's many layers to this, but it can be extremely simple as well. Like, it doesn't have to be complicated. Sometimes,
But knowing the
just
dosage, as you said, you can intuitively think, I need this or I can get that. And that's why it's a minefield sometimes, where you try something and it doesn't work, or it doesn't seem to work. And so you go somewhere else and get something else and get something else. And so the fact that if you can give somebody the dosage of something, because sometimes it's the smallest dosage that has the biggest effect, because it's literally that essence of what's needed, which can make a big change. Which is actually, I'm being told to say, remember, that's the same for energy. The tiniest thing sometimes is the thing that's needed, not the big thing.
Not the big thing. Totally.
But as humans, we the bigger
do
it
little.
is,
Do little.
do little. But we like gadget. Not me personally, but it's gadgets that does that, and we like to know why something works, and that's the hard thing to trust when we're going back now to the intuition. It doesn't matter to me where my information comes from. It doesn't matter to me how it comes. I know and trust that it's right, and it's from the purest source. Okay, whatever you want to call it, intuition, God, angels, whatever you want to call it, whatever your belief is, it doesn't matter. It matters that it gets to where is needed, and it can be accepted, and they can make it the smallest to change, which is what we should be doing with ourselves. Is if we can feel a difference, because the mind's very clever. If you think that something's going to make you better, it can make you better. And we know that from the placebo, but yet we are still convinced that somebody else has the power to do everything. And this is going on a whole nother subject, which is nothing to.
It's all good.
It does have things to do with horses, but
totally.
Yeah.
A lot of times the horses are such amazing messengers for being, and when we be, sometimes that that is when the intuition comes. And so if they're not able to be, like if they're in an uncomfortable body, they can be wonderful messengers for us to tune into our own body and say, like, how are we doing as well? Like, are we able to hold that being with them being, or how are we when they're not being as well as they could be, So I don't know why I said any of that.
I don't know, but it sounded lovely, and it's
That all
sinking
just
in.
go.
It's sinking in. So it has been so lovely chatting with you, and I don't know why we didn't get together sooner.
Yeah, I know. We
And
cross paths.
my jaw cheeks are still hurting from earlier, so much laughing. Before we go, if anybody's got a last question, so if anybody has a quick question that they'd like to ask Heather, quickly do a message and we'll get that on while we just have a little chat. So your podcast, I think I'll put a link on anyway at the end of this live, but I think I put it onto your website anyway. Your website's
Thank
attached to
you.
this,
Yeah.
but also I'll put a link up to your podcast. And it's so funny because I think I came across that before I started to do my podcast. I wasn't sure what to categorize it as, because what I have is really, there's not sort of something that quite fits it. So you try to find the nearest thing. And for ideas, I was looking at other people's, the pictures that they put up for the podcast. So I just made a simple one. And but I remember coming across yours and some other ones as well, and listening to those. So that's quite funny that I'm chatting to you now today, because that was that was a couple of years ago, I think. How long have you been doing your podcast?
Since I think September 2019. Almost the same time as I found horses, intensely at that barn. It's been fun, because then like 30% of the podcast is people I want to talk to in the horse world going, "Hi, I want to learn from you. Would you be on my podcast?" And it's just so wonderful. You have the same network, I'm sure, of, like, I call it the light bright board, of these bright lights around the world that you actually get to have an intimate conversation with about things that they don't usually talk about in their world. And
it's amazing when they say yes. I still find that very humbling, and like they say yes. Because as I'm sure you did, you contact people that don't know you.
Yes.
The last person, in fact, before this one, I was chatting to was Steve Halfpenny from Australia, and that really took me surprised, because the conversation went somewhere else, and I was like, I wasn't expecting that, and it was just lovely. It was really cool. It was really lovely, because he didn't come from horses, because he's English and he moved out there, and he wasn't into horses, but his wife says, you do realize we're going to have animals and horses. So he started to ride, and he said I was like a typical man, rode the horse as not like a machine, but it was meaning that sort of thing. And his wife said to him, there is another way. I don't like that way that you're. And he says, well, I don't know what you mean. And so he started to look into that through different things, and he's completely changed. So that was a really interesting conversation, because I did not expect that at all. And especially from when you're chatting to a man and you can be that open, it was
beautiful.
I really enjoyed that. But
beautiful. I actually found him through Listen to the Horse with Eileen Haney. I think that was her documentary, and I was enamored with that documentary and I've paid attention. Like, he does not get on a horse until they're 6, because he honors their spine, and I'm like, how beautiful, because that's not always the way.
No, and the fact, because when he was talking, he was like, a man just getting on a horse and expecting the man to do as it's told and all that. And he, that's quite brave to say that. So he's completely changed. So we have a question, Tara, again. There you go. You can do those nutrient checks remotely. Can you
Yes,
do those?
yes, because everything's energy. So it's like tuning in a radio station, 100%. Like that's the easiest way. Or a cell phone call. Like you don't actually see the waves of energy when we tune into a radio station or make a cell phone call or a telephone call for that matter. So I just tune in with the people's permission because they're usually on the phone.
Mm.
And I always check from the horse's perspective because every horse has their own personality. It's like you can't just barge into the barn with animals. You kind of check in with them and see whether or not they even want you in their field. And some are very chatty, and some, well, I'm talking to the choir here with Ronnie, but some are very chatty, some are very reserved, some are like, what are you wanting to do specifically? Like it is very, yeah, but it's
Mm.
like a radio station. And so my hand just becomes a surrogate for that
So
channel.
the answer is yes, Tara,
Everything's energy.
definitely. Yeah. I'll just share a quick little story. It was I went to see some horses at the weekend, and one particular horse, Pony, I'm sure she won't mind me mentioning, he was so chatty, but he was one of these horses that observed everything that was going on at the stables, at the yard, you call it a barn, and he was one of these horses that if people want to ride out, he would be a confident booster next to their horse, because he said, you know, I don't like to be at the front, I don't like to be at the back, I like to be in the middle. And then the owner said, yeah, because he's. I said, oh, well, that makes sense. And he had some personal messages for the owner. So when that happens, because there was people listening, I take the person away and just relay that part. But it was lovely because he was concerned about somebody there, and he says, you know, somebody needs your support, and I think it's somebody here. And it was one of the girls
Oh,
listening,
how
and she
wonderful.
says, I think that's me. And I said, oh, how beautiful that he's sharing that and he knows that. But he felt like somebody that would give you a hug and say, are you okay, take a seat, I'll make you a drink of tea. And they are so different, but yeah, he took me by surprise, because you do get them, but he was his energy field was big, and he observed and he felt everything, and he was willing to interact with that. So and he was comfortable in his skin. Doesn't mean to say he's perfect, but he wanted to do, he liked his role, he liked his job, he had fun, and that's what he wanted. Because sometimes you can have an animal that mentally they will keep going until it's time to go, and that's what they want, whether they've got 3 legs or 4. And then it's up to the owner to say, well, actually, I think we'll just step it down a little bit. And he was very much that character. He was lovely. He was lovely. I mean, I'm smiling now from the conversation because,
Yeah.
but it was a fact when he said, you know, there's somebody here that needs your support, and she happened to be stood there, which was like great, and everybody else guessed who it was too.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And they're magical moments because everybody gets to feel that love and that energy from that horse. And then you can see it in the face, like, wow, okay. Because it's not just a horse anymore.
No.
And that's lovely.
They are so much more than a horse.
Absolutely. Right. I think I've had you on here for quite a while now. So
thank you so much.
oh,
This
you are
is
welcome. It's been lovely. If
thank you.
Is there any parting words that you'd like to say before you go? If you haven't, don't worry. That's absolutely fine. You've said quite a lot.
I did.
Lots of information.
Being comes up more. I think y'all need to be more, less doing, more being.
Being in the moment,
Yeah.
wherever that is, and whatever that is.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Oh, well, it's been a real pleasure, Heather. If you don't mind just hanging on for a little bit so I can just say bye to you personally. and then yeah, we'll have a little chat. But okay,
Thank you
so I'll
so
just
much.
if you give me a little wave, I'll speak to you shortly. Oh, how lovely is Heather. My cheeks are hurting because I'm smiling, but also from the worry that this is going to go smoothly anyway because of the technical issues which you have. That's life. And what you see is real. So thank you to everybody that's joined. I hope you enjoyed that. There's so much information that Heather shared. If you want any more info, just go to her website and contact her personally, and I'm sure she'll be happy to get back to you. I definitely think I'd like to have her back. Not think, I would like to have her back again. It would be really nice to catch up and see what she's doing next year. Right, I'm going to go make a cup of tea because I'm really thirsty now because I've been talking too much. Thank you, everybody. Hi, Tara. Lovely to see you. Um, Oh, I'm so glad you enjoyed it. And thank you to everybody else. I'm sorry I didn't get all your comments up, but I try and let the guests speak. But you both see the comments when you go onto Facebook and I'll reply on there. Thank you very, very much. Have a lovely evening, lovely afternoon, wherever you are in the world. Take care, and I shall speak to you soon. Thank you, and bye for now.